OBGYNs wrote in a letter as part of this filing to the Supreme Court. They were concerned that they could be prosecuted if they gave an abortion to this woman who had had a miscarriage, unless it was to save the life of the mother, that legal distinction. The question was, what about the health of the mother? What if this threatens her health and fertility in the future? And Associated Press had pointed out that because of this concern by doctors, 6 patients had been medevaced out of the state of Idaho in order to get care. So the real world effect today is what for pregnant women if they believe and their doctors believe their health is at risk?
Under what the court has done today, those abortions should be able to resume in Idaho. But you're absolutely right. And we've spoken to so many doctors about this, and doctors who are there on the ground in Idaho. And they're grateful. I mean, we talked to one yesterday who said she was grateful that the court has kind of restored the status quo, but there's still confusion. There's still fear. This is a felony in Idaho that doctors could be facing if they run afoul of this Idaho law. So while, yes, you know, there may be some relief that it's resorted back to the status quo, the abortions can resume in these medical emergencies, that's still a lot of uncertainty there in that state. And I will say 1 in 5 OBs have left the state of Idaho since the court overturned Roe
That's
versus
right,
Wade.
22%. Idaho has lost 22% of their OBGYNs because those doctors say, I don't want to deal with the legal issues. So that has affected general care for women in the state of Idaho.
The legal issues and the threats, the repercussions of laws like this, the uncertainty about what you can and cannot do, what care can be provided, all of these come, Nora, in an atmosphere of great uncertainty. And when the court took this case up, it created 6 months of this actual law taking effect and 6 women's lives being materially disrupted. And when the court took it up, it said, we'll decide this case on the merits. As Jan will tell the audience, it is not deciding this case on the merits. It's not deciding whether this 1986 federal law universally protects care that stabilizes the health of a woman in distress. It does not. This means this will come back, and to put this in a political context, Nora, we have a debate tonight between 2 presidential candidates. And the last time they met, Joe Biden said abortion is on the ballot. Donald Trump said, what do you mean abortion's on the ballot? And Joe Biden said abortion rights in this country will be affected in the future. They are now. They're on the ballot in every state in the country. And this conversation will continue with long-lasting political effects.
Because this would not be an issue before the Supreme Court had not the Biden administration sued the state of Idaho.
Right.
And had the Supreme Court not issued the Dobbs opinion.
I have to say, again, you know, I'm going through some of these opinions. It is an unusual coalition of justices. You have 2 liberals, Justice Kagan and Justice Sotomayor, and then you have the Chief Justice, Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Brett Kavanaugh coming together to dismiss this case, which then, as we said, restores the status quo, allows these abortions to resume. But Justice Barrett, in her opinion, emphasizes that when they took the case, the law looked very different. In that interim, the Idaho Supreme Court has weighed in, the legislature has weighed in, and they have said in Idaho, these kind of abortions for serious medical emergencies are allowed even under the Idaho law. So they've given this guidance. Justice Barrett is saying the case has changed. We need to have this go back to the lower courts. But again, to Nora's, your point, the doctors still feel right now tremendous uncertainty.
I want to bring in Jessica Levinson, our CBS News legal contributor and also a Loyola Law School professor. Jessica, it is so good to have you. This one is interesting, as we have just been talking about. Why is it unsigned, and why did Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson write a partial dissent?
So per curiam means it's from the court. And what Justice Jackson said is, I'm ready to decide. She said, why are we sending this back down? I'm looking at a federal law, and the federal law says stabilizing treatment, and that includes life or health. And I'm looking at a state law, and the state law says only abortions for life. And what she's saying is there's a difference there, life and health versus life. That's a conflict. And she's saying, I'm looking at the supremacy clause in the Constitution. There's so many complicated constitutional questions, but this isn't one of them. When you have a federal law and a state law and they conflict, then the federal law wins. So I think that's what she's saying legally. I think she's also frustrated because, well, I believe that Justice Barrett is correct, that things changed since they took the case. Idaho said their exception is broader, and the federal government, frankly, I think also said their mandate is narrower. So that daylight arguably did collapse a bit between the two laws. But I don't think Justice Jackson wants to send this back down. She says, I'm ready. This was briefed. Let's go. And that's why we have this separate concurring dissenting opinion from her.
I mean,
it
this
is
so
fiery, too. I mean, Jessica is absolutely right. I mean, it is fiery. I mean, she says today's decision is not a victory for pregnant patients in Idaho. It is delay. And then she goes on to say the court had a chance to bring clarity and certainty to this tragic situation, and we have squandered it. So she is alone in saying that. You do have the three conservatives, some of the most conservative justices, kind of agreeing with her on one point. Yeah, we should have decided this today. We don't want to dismiss it, but they would have ruled for Idaho. So like we said, we have those five who are saying we're going to dismiss it. As Jessica discussed, Justice Jackson's like, no, we're ready. Let's go. We need to decide this now. This is just more delay. And then you have the three conservatives saying we need to decide this now, too, because we think Idaho's law is perfectly fine.
Once again, a reminder that abortion rights, reproductive rights, not only an issue in state races, in legislatures, but also before the Supreme Court as people still deal with the overturning of Roe versus Wade 2 years ago.
And this is the first case for the court to look at a state ban criminalizing abortion. This is the first one they've had since they overturned Roe versus Wade.
And when the court decided, Dobbs, overturning Roe versus Wade, it said states will be laboratories and they will experiment. Well, those in Idaho who oppose abortion rights wrote this law, and as soon as it was scrutinized, as soon as it became clear what the ramifications of it were, they began to backpedal under legal pressure and the visibility of what the implications of that law actually were. So this laboratory idea, yes, it's playing out, but trapped in the middle of that laboratory experimentation are women who have pronounced medical concerns, health risks, and they don't know where to go, and doctors don't know how to intervene.
Who fear prosecution. Jen, I do want to ask you, too, because, well, tonight we'll be watching and covering here on CBS that presidential debate. We have more decisions coming tomorrow from the Supreme Court, important decisions. Yes,
I mean, today's case, of course, one of several major decisions that we have been waiting on, including two involving former President Trump. One, whether he is immune from prosecution for his actions around January 6th and efforts to interfere with the 2020 election. And then if he's not immune, what can he be prosecuted for? Those are major questions that the court is poised to resolve either tomorrow or perhaps sometime next week that will have a direct impact on Special Counsel Jack Smith and whether he can bring this case to trial before the election.
Important news from here in Washington. Just to remind everybody, once again, the breaking news from the Supreme Court. The justices ruled that emergency abortions are allowed in Idaho in rare cases to protect a woman's health. And of course, this will have implications in the 5 other states that have this near total ban. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news, and a full wrap-up tonight on the CBS Evening News. And as I mentioned, we're going to see you tonight for coverage of that presidential debate and where we can expect to hear from the candidates on these very important issues. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell.
All right, folks, you've been watching a CBS News special report, and if you were watching, you know that the Supreme Court has decided another case that impacts abortion rights in America. The court has ruled to allow doctors to perform abortions to treat serious medical emergencies in the state of Idaho. That is a state with a near total abortion ban. This follows the justice's decision to overturn Roe versus Wade 2 years ago. Now, we got an idea of how the court would rule on Wednesday when a draft version of that decision was accidentally uploaded to the Supreme Court website. It was quickly taken down, but we had a little preview. So let's continue to dig into what this ruling means with defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Scott Frederickson, who joins me now. CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Misel is also joining us. Scott, let me begin with you, and let's dig into a little bit of what we heard at the end of the special report. The implications that this ruling will have for the other states that have similar near total abortion bans on the books. What does it mean for them?
Well, that's a great question. And unfortunately, I think the Supreme Court's decision today leaves that a bit unclear. Keep in mind, this decision today reinstates an injunction issued by the lower court, which means in Idaho, abortions can go forward where it is necessary to stabilize a woman's health. That likely means in the other 6 states, that is the law now. What I mean when I say it's somewhat ambiguous is that the Supreme Court today dismissed the case. It did not issue a substantive opinion. It said this case should not have come before us. It was improvidently granted, so they're sending it back for further litigation. All that means is that we're going to see a lot more litigation about this and related abortion cases. For the time being, it's a victory for those who have challenged the Idaho law in connection with the federal statute, which mandates that all hospitals anywhere are required to provide care to stabilize a patient in emergency situations. So for now, that is the law, but it also means that for now, we're going to see a lot more litigation. And I would add that Justice Jackson, in his very strong dissent, pointed out that essentially talking to her colleagues that we're ducking that issue when we are perfectly prepared to address it today. 3 other conservative justices essentially agreed with her as well. But in the end, that will come at another day. For now, the law is that the Idaho hospitals and others in those other 6 states who are restrictive abortion laws must provide abortions to women when their health requires it to stabilize their situation.
All right, Scott, thank you so much for standing by for these decisions. We'll be talking with you as we await more decisions, perhaps tomorrow or even next week. Thank you very much. As promised, CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Misel joins us now. So let's talk about reproductive rights, Shauna, and how they've been such a big campaign issue. There's a big debate tonight. How do we expect the candidates to address the decision from the Supreme Court today?
Vlad, good morning. We're already here in Atlanta ahead of tonight's debate. And in the wake of this decision, the Biden campaign is already responding. We have a senior advisor to the Biden campaign on this Supreme Court decision saying women's health, lives, and freedoms remain in peril across the country because of Donald Trump. Because of Trump's Supreme Court majority overturned Roe versus Wade, women are being turned away from emergency rooms and forced to the brink of death before receiving the care they need. You can almost expect Joe Biden to similarly take this approach tonight on the debate stage. We know abortion has been a huge part of Biden's re-election campaign and platform, and it is one of the issues that he says should be top of mind for voters, and he is really hoping that this is one of the issues that will propel him back to the White House, particularly in some of those swing states where we could see abortion on the ballot, like Arizona and Nevada.
So, Shauna, you've been on the campaign trail all year long. What are voters telling you? And not so much voters who are Democrats who already plan to vote for President Biden, or even Republicans who already plan to vote for Donald Trump. I want to know about those undecided voters, those people in the middle, perhaps independent, perhaps suburban women. What are they telling you?
That's the really interesting part, Vlad. This issue of abortion really has voters split and rethinking how they've talked about this issue in previous years since the Dobbs decision. You've seen issues like IVF procedures kind of come into focus, and now it has become a whole gambit of reproductive rights. So those undecided voters, even voters who say they support former President Donald Trump, are still trying to quell that opinion with believing that women should have access to abortion. And even those who don't believe in abortion are trying to reconcile that with kind of seeing that they believe some women should have access to abortions in certain cases like incest or rape.
All right, Shauna Misel reporting for us from Atlanta, where that debate is happening tonight. Shauna, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, let's continue to dig into this with Elizabeth Sepper. She's a professor of law at the University of Texas, and she joins me now. So Elizabeth, give our viewers a little sense of the history of this case. And I'm particularly intrigued by Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's fiery dissent. Break that down for us.
This case originates from a lawsuit the Biden administration filed against Idaho. There's a conflict in Idaho between the Federal Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which requires stabilizing treatment, including abortion, for emergency medical conditions. That includes conditions where someone's health is in serious jeopardy. But Idaho's abortion ban says doctors can't provide emergency abortion care unless a woman's life is at stake. And so there's a conflict between these two laws. The Biden administration prevailed at early stages in the trial court, receiving a preliminary injunction against the Idaho law. So doctors were momentarily allowed to perform emergency abortions consistent with EMTALA. The case then went up to the Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit, at which point the Supreme Court reached out and took the case before the Ninth Circuit could issue any opinion or even hear the case on the merits. And at that point in time, the Supreme Court stayed the trial court's preliminary injunction, which meant that EMTALA did not apply to pregnant people in Idaho since January, so that lots of women were airlifted out of the state because they could not receive emergency treatment in Idaho emergency departments. And so Justice Jackson really reprimanded the conservative majority of the Supreme Court. It was clear the conservative justices had determined to reach out and take this case early, had determined to leave Idaho women without emergency abortion care for 5 months. And then here we are at the end of June, and suddenly they have changed their minds. And what she reminds us is this just delays the inevitable, that these cases will be back at the U.S. Supreme Court, probably after the election. All right, Professor Elizabeth Sepper, thank you very much. We appreciate you. CBS News campaign reporter, attorney Katrina Kaufman is standing by outside the Supreme Court. Katrina, so three big cases out of the way today. What are we waiting on? You know, everybody is hoping that we will get that decision on January 6th and presidential immunity. What are your thoughts?
We're waiting for both of those decisions, and a lot of people think that immunity will probably be the last one that this court puts out. I mean, the Supreme Court can be unpredictable. As of now, tomorrow is the final opinion day on the calendar, but it's starting to seem quite likely that this could bleed into next week. And of course, that immunity case is about whether or not a president is immune from criminal prosecution. The other big case that we're still waiting on is Fisher, which is about the January 6th Capitol rioters and whether or not the obstruction of an official proceeding statute that was used in hundreds of these cases can stand. That statute has always been used in relation to the destruction of documents or records, which is a really different context than the storming of the Capitol. And that case has important implications for the D.C. election interference case against Donald Trump, which also has obstruction of an official proceeding in two elements of the charges.
All right, Katrina, I hope you've booked an extended stay at your hotel. Thanks so much. We'll be checking in with you, I'm sure, tomorrow and perhaps even next week. All right, folks, we got a lot more news coming in live right now. You can see it happening all behind me right now, but stay with us. You are streaming CBS News 24/7.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Okay, let's go.
You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going.
The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education. Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
All right, the Supreme Court has decided a case that impacts abortion rights across